So you didn't tell the truth to this committee again when you said that you comply with court orders and decisions. You've overseen the deportation of U.S. citizen children and have claimed that their parents chose to take their children with them. But you produced no evidence that the mother, let alone both parents, of those children freely gave consent. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to associate myself with Mr. Garcia's statement. I can't believe that we would send somebody or anyone from our country somewhere else and say, well, we cut off all communication. We're a better country than that. And I just thank Mr. Garcia for raising that question. Secretary Noem, at the start of this hearing, you stood here and took an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Then you sat down and dodged the truth over and over and over for a little more than 3 hours, so help you God. You repeatedly testified that you and the Department of Homeland Security will follow the Constitution, the laws, and the order of the Supreme Court. Well, the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And yet, a federal court found that the Department of Homeland Security, under your watch, believes that it has a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process. So you did not tell the truth to this committee today when you said you would follow the Constitution and comply with due process. You also testified that you follow orders of the Supreme Court of the United States and all courts. But the Supreme Court unanimously directed the government to facilitate the return of Kilmar Garcia to the United States. But you just testified before this committee that Kilmar Garcia will never return to the United States. So you didn't tell the truth to this committee again when you said that you comply with court orders and decisions. You've overseen the deportation of U.S. citizen children and have claimed that their parents chose to take their children with them. But you produced no evidence that the mother, let alone both parents, of those children freely gave consent to have their children deported from the United States. In fact, everyone involved in those cases say that the mothers, in fact, did not want their children, especially their sick American children, deported. In fact, your agency lured families to ICE appointments under false pretenses, lied to them, refused to let them speak with an attorney or children's father, and deported them before a court had time to even hear the case. You've given yourself the unilateral right to deport anyone you deem a threat. You refuse to comply with court orders that try to stop you. That puts all of us at risk. Beyond your false testimony about the administration's deportation policies, you falsely stated that the administration is focused on a full range of DSH's missions. Instead, your budget request appears to reflect a view that DHS's sole purpose is to be a border wall construction agency that deports U.S. citizen children with cancer. Your budget proposed cuts to cybersecurity, emergency preparedness, and aviation security. Even before asking Congress for these budget cuts, you've overseen mass reductions in the workforce at CISA and FEMA. Despite repeated requests from this committee on how many people have been fired or have been bullied into quitting before their tenure, DHS has refused to share that information. So it should worry every American that we do not know how many people are left at FEMA to respond to disasters, and how many cyber defenders still work at CISA as China and other adversaries attack our systems every day. And you've made clear in response to my questioning, you have no plan, written plans for FEMA. It is very apparent that also is no plan for CISA, where you are trying to gut the agency's funding and falsely claiming that CISA is a censorship agency. Since CISA never censored anyone, but now we are all paying the price for you buying into a baseless conspiracy theory. Secretary Noem, I'm glad that you finally came to testify before this committee, but I'm disappointed, along with a lot of my Democratic colleagues, that you stood here and took an oath to tell the truth, then repeatedly failed to do so to this committee. Let me just say, if you dance with the devil long enough, he's liable to follow you home. I hope that you will stop dancing around the truth and start telling the truth so this committee can do its work, helping to defend DHS from the attacks you've launched against it. Mr. Chair.
When the cameras stopped rolling and the last voices faded from that hearing room, the silence said more than the speeches ever could. You could almost feel the weight of it, the kind of silence that comes after truth has been challenged, bent, or maybe even buried. The congressman's words, his frustration, his anger, they weren't just political performance. They were the sound of something many Americans have been feeling for a long time, the slow collapse of trust. This hearing wasn't unique, not really. We've seen this play out before. Promises of transparency, oaths to the Constitution, then the dodge, the denial, the dance around accountability. It's a cycle as old as Washington itself, but what made this one different was the tone. There was no pretending, no carefully crafted civility left in that room, just open confrontation, truth versus power, and both claiming to be on the same side. And that's where the story hits hardest, because when both sides insist they're defending truth, it means the line between fact and fiction has blurred beyond recognition. It's not just about who's right or wrong anymore, it's about who's louder, who commands the narrative, who controls the moment. The real casualty isn't reputation or policy, it's trust, the one currency democracy can't afford to lose. For 3 long hours, the secretary tried to navigate that storm, denying, deflecting, reciting policy points that sounded more like armor than answers. The congressman pressed harder, his tone turning from frustration to disbelief. Each question carried the weight of something personal, something that sounded less like politics and more like betrayal. And when he finally delivered that line, "If you dance with the devil long enough, he'll follow you home," the room froze. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder that lies have consequences even when they wear a government badge. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That moment wasn't just about her. It was about all of them. Every official who forgets that an oath isn't just ceremonial. Every leader who believes accountability is optional. When the people in power start bending the truth, it teaches everyone watching that bending it is acceptable. That's how nations drift, not through sudden collapse, but through quiet compromise, one small moral shortcut at a time. Still, for all the outrage and anger that echoed in that room, there was also something else, a glimpse of what democracy looks like when it's fighting for its own life. The congressman's fire, the back and forth, even the silence of those who just listened. That's what democracy sounds like in its rawest form. Messy, loud, uncomfortable, but still alive. Because as long as someone is willing to speak, there's still hope that truth hasn't been completely drowned out. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Accountability isn't just the job of one committee or one political party, it's the job of every citizen who refuses to look away. The people in that room work for the public, but it's the public who decides whether the truth matters enough to fight for. The danger isn't that leaders lie, it's that the audience stops caring when they do. As viewers, as voters, as citizens, we have a choice every time moments like this unfold. We can treat it as spectacle, another clip to scroll past, another headline to forget, or we can treat it as a warning. Because if truth becomes entertainment, then democracy becomes a show without an ending. Look at that hearing one more time. The faces, the tension, the exhaustion, these aren't just politicians performing, they're reflections of a system on edge. And the question isn't whether they'll find the truth, but whether we'll keep demanding it from them. Every great democracy depends on a shared belief that facts exist, that oaths mean something, and that justice isn't just a word thrown around in hearings. Once that belief dies, it doesn't matter who wins the argument. The people lose either way. Maybe that's why the congressman's final words still echo beyond the chamber walls. If you dance with the devil long enough, he will follow you home. It's poetic, but it's also prophetic. Because the devil in politics isn't a person, it's the temptation to put power above principle, to trade truth for convenience, to believe that accountability is someone else's problem. And when a government starts dancing to that rhythm, eventually, everyone pays the price. So as the headlines fade and new controversies take their place, this moment should stay with us, not as outrage, but as memory. The kind that reminds us what's at stake when leaders forget the value of honesty. The kind that reminds us why hearings, investigations, and debates still matter even when they seem pointless. They matter because truth, no matter how battered or buried, still finds its way into the room. And maybe one day, when the silence returns after another stormy session, it won't feel heavy, it'll feel earned. Because that's what accountability sounds like. Not applause, not noise, but the quiet peace that comes when the truth finally speaks for itself. Until then, we keep listening, we keep questioning, and most of all, we keep believing that truth, even when cornered, still deserves to be heard.